Subscribe to this channel and tap the bell icon so we can continue this journey of resting with the Holy Spirit every night together. God bless you. Part 1. The Silence Before the Storm. There was a man named Elijah Carter who had stopped believing in miracles, not because he was cruel or bitter or even particularly angry at the world. He had simply grown tired of praying into what felt like an empty sky, tired of asking for signs that never came, tired of watching good people suffer while the wicked seemed to thrive. He was 38 years old, lived alone in a modest apartment on the edge of a city that never slept, and worked as a night shift security guard at a building that housed a company he didn't understand, selling products he didn't care about. His life was not tragic. That was the strange part. It was just hollow. Every morning when he came home from his shift, he would pass a small church on the corner of 5th and Maple. It was an old stone church with a wooden door painted deep red and a sign out front that someone changed every week with little white plastic letters. He had stopped reading the signs months ago. He had stopped going inside years ago. But on this particular morning, a Tuesday in late June when the air was thick with humidity and the birds hadn't yet started singing, he stopped. He didn't know why. He looked at the sign. Someone had arranged the letters in a slightly crooked row. God says, I couldn't keep this a secret any longer. Open it. Elijah stared at the sign for a long time. He felt something strange move through his chest. Not quite emotion, not quite logic. Something in between. Like a key turning in a lock he had forgotten existed. He almost walked away. He almost laughed. He almost told himself it was just a gimmick, a trick to pull wandering strangers through a red wooden door. But instead, for a reason he could not explain to any reasonable person, Elijah Carter pulled open the door and walked inside. Part 2. The Empty Church. The church was empty. It was early, barely 6 in the morning. The pews were wooden and worn smooth by decades of hands and knees and prayers. The light came through stained glass windows in long, colored fingers, blue, gold, deep red, laying themselves across the floor like a quilt made of light. Elijah sat down in the last pew. He didn't kneel. He didn't bow his head. He just sat, the way a man sits when he is very tired and has nowhere particular to be. I don't even know why I'm here, he said aloud. His voice sounded strange in the quiet space, too loud, then swallowed immediately by the silence. He sat for a while longer. Nothing happened. He was about to leave. He had even stood up, put his hand on the back of the pew, when he noticed something on the seat beside him. A small envelope, plain white. No name on the front. It hadn't been there when he sat down. He was certain of that. He looked around. The church was still empty. The door hadn't opened. No one had passed him. He picked up the envelope. It was sealed, but lightly. The flap came open without resistance, as though it had been waiting for exactly this moment, for exactly his fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten. The ink was dark blue, the letters carefully formed, almost like calligraphy but warmer, more human. He read it. Part 3. The letter. Dear Elijah, I know you don't think I've been listening. I know you believe that your prayers dissolved somewhere between your lips and the ceiling, that they never traveled further than the room you were in. I know you've been carrying something heavy for a very long time, a weight you've never fully named, not even to yourself. I couldn't keep this a secret any longer. The secret is this: I have been with you every single day, not in the way you expected, not with thunder, not with visions, not with burning bushes or parted seas. I've been with you in the small things, in the cup of coffee that was exactly the right temperature on the worst morning of your life, in the song that came on the radio at precisely the moment you needed to hear it, in the stranger who smiled at you on the subway when you felt completely invisible. You asked me once, you were 17, sitting on a roof, watching the city. You asked me if any of this meant anything. I heard you. I have always heard you. The reason I kept this close, the reason I didn't shout it from every corner of your life, was because I was waiting for you to be ready to receive it. Not because I was testing you, not because you needed to earn it, but because a heart that is closed cannot be filled, no matter how much is poured into it. Your heart is open now. even if you don't feel it yet. The fact that you walked through that door this morning, that was not coincidence. That was you, listening to something deeper than your own doubts. I have a purpose for you, Elijah. Not a grand performance, not a stage with spotlights. A quiet, steady, real purpose. The kind that unfolds one day at a time, one honest moment at a time. Open your life the way you opened this envelope. That is all I ask. The secret I could no longer keep is simply this. You are loved, completely, without condition, without end. Now go, and don't be afraid. The letter was not signed. There was no name at the bottom. Elijah sat holding the paper for a long time. His hands were not shaking. That surprised him. He had expected, if something like this ever happened to him, that he would shake, or weep, or feel some enormous wave of overwhelming emotion crash over him. Instead, he felt quiet. Deeply, unusually quiet. The way the world sounds after snow falls in the night and you step outside in the early morning before anyone else is awake. He folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. Part 4. What changed? He did not become a different person overnight. That is not how these things work, and this is not that kind of story. He went home, he slept. He woke up in the afternoon and made eggs and sat by the window and watched the neighborhood go about its business. A woman walking a dog, 2 boys on bicycles arguing about something important only to them, a delivery truck double parked while a man carried boxes with the careful speed of someone who has done this 10,000 times. He thought about the letter. He thought about his mother, who had died 4 years ago and who had believed, completely and without apology, in the things Elijah had slowly stopped believing in. She used to say, "God doesn't shout, baby. God whispers. You have to get quiet enough to hear." He had never been quiet enough, until now. The next morning, he walked to the church again. He didn't know what he expected. Another envelope, perhaps, or some continuation of whatever had begun. But there was no envelope. The church was the same. The light came through the same windows. The pews were the same warm, worn wood. There was, however, an old man. He was sitting in the front pew, very still, with his hands folded in his lap and his head slightly bowed. He wasn't praying out loud. He was just present, the way very old people sometimes are, with a completeness that younger people haven't learned yet. Elijah almost turned around. Instead, he walked to the front and sat down 2 pews behind the old man. After a while, without turning around, the old man said, "You came back." Elijah said, "How did you know I was here before?" "I didn't," the old man said. "I just knew someone would come back. Someone always does." His name was Arthur. He was 79 years old. He had been coming to this church for 51 years, since the morning after his wife left him, and he had walked through that same red door not knowing why. He had never left, not the faith, not the church, not the practice of showing up even when he felt nothing. "Does it always feel like something?" Elijah asked. "No," Arthur said simply. "Mostly it feels like nothing. But I've learned that the nothing is not emptiness. It's more like soil. You can't see what's growing underground." Part 5. The secret spreads. Elijah began to change slowly, the way seasons change. Imperceptibly at first, then suddenly, all at once, you look up and realize everything is different. He started listening, really listening, to people at work, to the old woman in the apartment above his who knocked on his door sometimes to ask if he'd seen her cat. He hadn't, but he started looking. He started noticing the small moments his letter had described, the coffee, the song, the unexpected smile from a stranger. He found that once you start looking for signs of grace, they are everywhere. Not supernatural, not miraculous in the conventional sense, but real, consistent, faithful. He wrote a letter back. He didn't know who he was writing to, not precisely. He sat at his small kitchen table with a pen and paper. He had never been much for typing things that mattered. And he wrote, "I think I've been angry at you for a long time without realizing it. I think I confused your silence with absence. I'm sorry for that. I'm going to try to be quieter. I'm going to try to open things more.
doors, conversations, my own chest. I don't know exactly what you want from me, but I'm willing to find out. He didn't send it anywhere. He folded it and put it in the same envelope with the letter he had received, and he kept them both in the drawer of his nightstand. That was enough. Part 6. What the secret was really about. 3 months later, Elijah left his night shift job. Not impulsively, not recklessly. He had saved enough, and he had been offered a position at a community center 3 blocks from the church, working with teenagers who were exactly where he had been at 17, sitting on metaphorical rooftops, asking silent questions at the sky. He wasn't a counselor. He wasn't a preacher. He was just a man who showed up, who listened, who sometimes said, "I hear you," and meant it with his whole body. One afternoon, a 16-year-old girl named Priya sat across from him in the community center's small, cluttered office and said, "Do you ever feel like nothing you do matters? Like the universe is just completely indifferent?" Elijah thought about a white envelope on a church pew. He thought about a letter written in dark blue ink. He thought about soil and things growing underground. "I used to," he said, "and then something happened that I still can't completely explain. But the short version is, I think the universe is less indifferent than it appears. I think it's just quiet. And I think the quiet is an invitation, not an absence." Priya looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "That's a weird thing to say." "I know," Elijah said. "But also," she said slowly, "kind of what I needed to hear." Epilogue: The Open Envelope. The letter stayed in Elijah's nightstand drawer for years. He read it sometimes, not often, but when he needed to. When the hollow feeling tried to come back. When the noise of the world got too loud and the quiet felt impossible to find. He never found out who had left it. He asked Arthur once, and the old man had simply smiled and said, "Does it matter?" He decided it didn't. What mattered was what the letter had said. Open it. Open the door. Open the envelope. Open the life. The secret that God, or the universe, or grace, or whatever word sits most comfortably in your particular heart, could no longer keep was not complicated. It was not hidden in ancient texts, or accessible only to the righteous, or the learned, or the faithful. It was this: you are not alone. You have never been alone. And you are loved in a way that requires nothing from you except the willingness to receive it. The door had always been read. It had always been unlocked. All you ever had to do was open it. End.